we're making history in London because every child that goes to a primary school in London is now eligible for a free school meal. Not means tested, everyone gets a healthy, nutritious meal for free. And it's personal to me because I benefited from means tested free school meals, thoroughly enjoyed the meals. It gave my parents a lifeline and breathing space. But I still remember the embarrassment and the stigma queuing up to get my token for free school meals, eating my lunch separately from my mates. I don't want other children to go through that, but also I recognise that every child that receives a free school meal, their family will save £440 a year. But also speaking to experts, what's quite clear is, having a nutritional meal leads to better attainment, better attendance, better productivity, better concentration, better health. But also the families of these children have breathing space and a lifeline.
Yesterday, Labour's new shadow work and pension secretary, she refused to commit to universal free school meals because she says that, you need to if you're going to make a commitment, you have to fund it. I mean, how have you managed to fund it and the Labour Party can't?
Well, firstly, I can understand why the Labour Party, this far out from the general election, the National Labour Party, can't give too much detail in relation to promises they want to make. For the obvious reason, there's going to be another autumn statement, another budget, another autumn statement, and we don't know how bad the book's going to be in 18 months' time, and hopefully there's a Labour government. What we've done in City Hall is use £130 million from business rates and £5 million from our City Hall reserves to pay for this policy. I've been straight with Londoners. I'd rather, under-promise and over-deliver. I've explained I can pay for this for a year because of, the monies I've identified to help with the cost of living crisis when at its most acute. I'd rather do that than over-promise and under-deliver, make a promise before an election, after an election, ditch the promise. I'm not one of those guys who promises to get rid of tuition fees, then troubles them once I'm the Deputy Prime Minister.
Did the Tories force your hand on this? Do you think it's something the government should be paying for?
One of the things that I think we're seeing more and more of is what I call cost shunting, where the government devolves responsibility to cities, regions, councils, but not the budget for doing so. So Londoners are paying the consequences of Liz Truss's mini budget. The government's paying the consequences of economic mismanagement. The government's paying the consequences of this government's lack of preparedness for the consequences of Putin's invasion of Ukraine and so forth, with no support financially. And so what I say to the government is look at the lessons from London in relation to rolling this policy out across England. Look, I'll give you one example. To be eligible for means-tested free school meals, as a family, your income's got to be less than £7,400 after tax. Very few people earn that little money. In Northern Ireland, the financial threshold is £14,000. So more children living in poverty receive a free school meal in Northern Ireland. And so what the government should be recognising is, children have to go to school. Many of them going hungry. Nobody would consider when somebody's an inpatient in hospital, having patients going hungry, or means testing patients in a hospital. Why children?
But then 14,000 is still very low, isn't it? Do you think the threshold should be, you should be looking at lower middle class children as well?
There should be no threshold. Firstly, even so-called middle class people are struggling. They're just about managing. Some of their mortgages have gone up by £300, £400, £500 a month for no good reason. But actually, you saw in this school the benefits of children eating next to each other from different socioeconomic backgrounds. That social mixing, that interaction, is really, really important. Those soft skills are really, really important. But also the evidence, I hope, is going to be that all children do better as a consequence of this. It leads to what we call better social cohesion. It leads to the school doing better. There is some work done by PwC in relation to the economic benefits of universal free school meals. And, over a 20-year period, we benefit in billions of pounds in relation to less expense for the NHS, in relation to better productivity, in relation to people's earnings being enhanced because of better, performance at school and so forth. So I think, the government should be looking in relation to investment in universal free school meals for those in primary schools, and also, if possible, those in secondary as well.
We're in this really beautiful school today, but how does it make you feel knowing there are a lot of Londoners who couldn't send their children to school because the roofs are caving in?
One of the things that I think people need to recognise is what we're seeing over the last few days is a consequence of government policy. These schools crumbling didn't just happen. In 2010, this government took a decision, it was a political choice to have austerity, to cut the Building Schools for Future programme that the Labour government I was proud to be a member of had. So that program was cut. I remember as an MP in Tooting saying to Michael Gove, why are you cutting these programs for these schools that are crumbling? And they chose to have austerity. In 2021, Rishi Sunak, as Chancellor, chose again to cut by half the budgets for school capital expenditure, and those chicks have come home to roost. This has been the government since 2010. They simply can't blame governments of yesteryear. That's why it's really important to recognise not only are public services crumbling, but literally our schools are crumbling too as a consequence of this government's policies.
And speaking of apportioning blame, how did it feel getting the blame for Ulez?
Well, I'm very proud of Ulez. I'm really proud that we're taking action to reduce air pollution, to tackle the climate emergency and to reduce congestion. Look, the decision to expand the Ulez was not an easy one. It's one of the most difficult decisions I've taken, but it's a vital one and it's the right one. In central London, there was disquiet when we originally introduced the policy. What we saw after a year, a reduction by almost 50% of air pollution, a third fewer children being admitted to hospital as a consequence of air pollution-related illnesses. We expanded it to inner London, a lot of noise, a lot of opposition, a further reduction by 20%, but also children going to 1,400 schools benefiting from cleaner air. I appreciate there are concerns in outer London. We're addressing those concerns, the biggest scrappage scheme ever, but the reality is it's in outer London where there's the worst air. The 10 boroughs with the biggest numbers of premature deaths are all in outer London. I think clean air is a privilege, not a right, and I'm confident, just like in central London and inner London, people realise once the policy began it was a good policy. In outer London, they will too as well. Just
as a last question, I just wanted to know how you felt personally to some of the blowback that you received because of rolling out the Ulez policy. I mean, there was one absolutely extraordinary tweet from Charlie Mullins, who runs Pimlico Plumbers, who suggested that you should be killed for it. I mean, how do you react to that?
Well, look, I think it's right and proper in a democracy, particularly if people disagree, to have robust debate, robust discussion, protest, demos, petitions, lobbying, tough questions. They're all part and parcel of a democracy. I think the idea that you should either threaten somebody or incite violence or incite criminality is wrong. And I make this in the context of somebody who was a friend of, Jo Cox. Jo Cox was a brilliant woman, a mother, a wife, a politician, who was killed because of her job and her beliefs. That can't be right. And so I'd say to people in a respectful way is, be cognizant, be aware of the consequences of what you're going to say. Social media is a powerful medium for good often, but sometimes, for ill.